Davey. So I'm just going to share some slides with you now. So starting on the 2nd of October, this free training course offers local Cavan communities and enterprises a great opportunity to get themselves climate ready. So if you're interested, please do click on the links that we will be pasting into the Zoom chat window now. We will share this again with you throughout the workshop, and we invite you to sign up to the class, and please do spread the word with friends and family and neighbours. If you'd like to find out more about the course and what it's all about, Davey's going to be giving an overview on that in a minute, but you can also download our course outline. Again, the link should be appearing in the chat window, so do take a look. And later on, we'll hear, as Davey said, from Hannah Brady, one of our participants in course 1, to hear firsthand how the course was for her. So to set the context for all of this, I'd like to speak briefly about the Sustainable Development Goals. Back in 2015, Ireland and Kenya were hugely instrumental as member states of the United Nations to help adopt the Agenda 2030. And this was a huge universal agenda that encompasses 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs as they're called. These goals cover social, economic, and environmental sustainability. Sustainable Development Goals are a call to action by all countries, poor, rich, and middle income, to promote prosperity while protecting the planet. Usually divided into economic, environmental, and social pillars, a group in Sweden called the Stockholm Resilience Center have a new and I think exciting way of viewing the Sustainable Development Goals, and they call it the wedding cake. This sees economies and societies as embedded parts of the biosphere. This is where we see a natural hierarchy, where nature is the key foundation on which all health is built. This is the basis for a viable economy, is dependent on a healthy society, which in turn is dependent on a long-term and sustainable interaction with a healthy biosphere. This base layer is our biosphere: life on land, life below water, clean water and sanitation, and climate action, the subject of this training course. The central layer contains our society, where we address poverty, sustainable cities and communities, peace, justice and strong institutions, affordable and clean energy, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, and zero hunger. The top layer then is our economy. This is about innovation and sustainable infrastructure, reduced inequalities, and responsible production and consumption. This model challenges our traditional understanding of how the world works, where our social, economic, and ecological development are seen as often separate individual parts and often in competition with each other. The Sustainable Development Goals are a blueprint for a more sustainable world, offering real recovery built on a solid foundation and a healthy biosphere. Through the Sustainable Development Goals, we can revalue our world in a dynamic new way, this time based on 5 healthy principles of planet, people, prosperity, peace, and partnership. We hope that this course, Cavan Communities for Climate Action, is delivered within the context of these global goals. And we think it's a great opportunity for communities and tidy towns groups within Cavan to improve their performance in competitions like the Tidy Towns competition. And we would really welcome you joining with us on this journey to find out more. If you're interested in posting something on Twitter or on social media, please use the hashtag Cavan Climate Action. And again, I hope that gives you a general context for how we're planning to deliver this course within the context of these global goals. So I'm just going to stop sharing there. And we're lucky now to have, I suppose, our next guest, who really does need no introduction, but I'll do it anyway. Duncan Stewart. Duncan he's an architect and an environmentalist and a media personality, best known for his environmental activism and his work on RTE and EcoEye, which is now running nearly 20 years. So far ahead of your time you are, Duncan, and you're still at it. It's brilliant.
And Anja,
I understand. And I understand.
Taking over from me, Gavin.
Absolutely, and Anja will be talking with Davey in a minute. So we've got two EcoEyes here today, a pair of EcoEyes talking for us tonight. So Duncan, I understand you're a clarinet player as well, so maybe we get a song out here, a tune out of you at some stage.
Well, probably it would clear all of your audience away very quickly if I did play it. But it's a great way if you want to clear the pub at night time.
Yeah, well, that's what they probably hire you for. But no, I'd love to hear you playing sometime. So, Duncan, I gave a brief introduction there to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. You know, what do they mean to you?
Well, they're essential, absolutely essential to us humans, all of us, to civilization, right across the planet. And, right down to small communities in every county in the country, and down to families, down to individuals, but especially small communities where action can really take place. In my view, if we continue as we are without the Sustainable Development Goals, we as a species are out of control. We're destroying the biosphere, as you showed there. The fundamentals of everything that we do depends on the biosphere. And of course, even below the biosphere, we have the planetary systems. We have Earth as a, if you like, physical Earth orbiting around the sun. And within that, we have got basically the planetary regulating systems, the atmosphere, the oceans, etc.
Yeah, I mean, in truth, that is the real bank, isn't it? I mean, when you think of it in sort of that, where real value lies, it lies in healthy biosphere, clean air, clean water, this foundation.
Absolutely. And the trouble is, as a species, we're now nearly 8 billion people. We quadrupled over the last 100 years. And in that time, wildlife has plummeted way down in numbers. As we know, even over the last, 40 years, we've seen situations where our wildlife have gone dramatically down to tiny numbers of what they were. So we're heading for extinction of all species, the way we're going. And we're looking to 2050 well, first of all, with the SDGs, they're looking to 2030. And I mean, those 8 years left, remember, we're practically halfway through the 15 years of the Sustainable Development Goals. And now, and halfway through, one has to look and see, are we in Ireland performing really in terms of the 17 goals?
I mean, as that, when you say that, like as a measurement, they're a very valuable tool to be able to track progress. But if we're not doing anything about it, I suppose we're not tracking much. I mean, that's why making them part of common discourse, normal day conversation, raising their volume, so to speak, in society is a really important task, isn't it?
Yes, and you mentioned there too, there's the social issues, there's the economic issues, and then there's the environmental one within the three pillars as we know them. And of course, the economic one dominates. It's not just that they're all playing against each other, but the economic one is just exploiting the other two. And the social one basically then is in turn exploiting basically our ecosystems, and our planetary systems. So we're out of control as a species, and we need to quickly start to manage ourselves in a way that is going to mean that our children have a future. Because what we're actually doing is we're stealing our children's future in what we're doing, because we're leaving this planet going to be in a very inhospitable way.
Yeah,
The way we're going. So it's urgent that we do, and it needs to be brought down to every level, because the principles of the Sustainable Development Goals are really important. Their targets are really important. They've got good indicators there to kind of show what can be done, and we can measure these issues. But we need to put them into real actions and see success, because they have to lead us in a different direction to where we're going. And we also need to see them in such a way as that they're very interdependent upon each other. You know, the social goals, which include health, you know, those particular ones of hunger, poverty, and even education would be in there among that group to a certain extent, even though education covers all 17 really. But if we look at that, and then we look at the economic ones, they mean the best within the economic ones, but unless they're integrated and managed in a cross-cutting way, that we basically manage our biosphere and our nature.
An interesting one. I think a lot of people have kind of seen them, particularly things like hunger and poverty and, you know, gender equality. They've often been interpreted as being issues for the developing world. But in fact, the truth is we need to tackle all of these things as well in the developed world. It's the 17 goals work for everybody, really, don't they?
Absolutely. And the trouble is that we're doing the damage. The developing world, who are at the receiving end of our impacts, you know, poor people are very vulnerable in the developing world, the vast majority of the population of the planet. But us, the more privileged, the wealthy in the West, and here in Ireland especially, we're exploiting the resources, over-exploiting the resources, and we're dumping massive pollution into our atmosphere and into our oceans.
Yeah, and we've been historically doing it. I mean, just an interesting fact, I think 33 countries are responsible for nearly 70 or 80% of total historical global emissions, because they are there since James Watt invented his steam engine, whatever, 250 years ago. So yeah, there's a historical responsibility here as well, isn't there?
Absolutely. And the trouble is we're not really accounting ourselves for the damage we all do ourselves. Now, I'm not trying to blame individuals, that's not fair. But I think we need to think in terms of the collective and in terms of the common good, and focus on what we can do together to manage our communities in such a way that we all are participating actively in our communities. And really, it's the collective thing of working together that can achieve the benefits.
So a course like this, for example, you know, where we're trying to invite communities, citizens, businesses from Cavan to come together to I suppose learn within this framework of the sustainable goals. How important do you think that is at a local level to provide those kind of learning environments?
I think it's critically important, and I think everybody, we're talking about Cavan, but everybody in Cavan should be participating in this, of all ages, in schools, everywhere, because this is the critical building blocks of our whole life. If we don't start performing well in this area, and there's so much we can do, and there's so many benefits, and there's so many positives associated with it, it really should be, in a way, I kind of, when you mention that, I kind of say, well, maybe we should go out like a Pied Piper and round up everybody. Get everybody in. Because
maybe come up with your clarinet and do it for us in Cavan.
Well, I might have to hunt with my clarinet behind, you know, but put it this way, I kind of feel it really needs to be mainstreamed right across. And we need everyone that does the course to go out there and promote it, and to be like ambassadors for it, and to, if you like, show good example and show successes on the ground, especially when they work together collectively to do so. You know, I'm very conscious of the importance of bringing people together, and it's through the economy of numbers that we can achieve really good things. And through that collaboration, we have much more power, we've got more strength, we can do many more things, you know. Whereas as individuals, we tend to be very isolated, and it's quite difficult, and it's very frustrating for people. So
that sense of disempowerment is actually, I think, it's a huge barrier often. I think people can, and you know, what I say to groups who do these courses, I say, look, when you come together, form a group, form a Cavan Communities for Climate Action, so that you can actually, I suppose, support each other in this, and find that broader family almost, rather than, I think that sometimes people can feel a bit immobilized by it all, or powerless. And it's really through connecting with your neighbors, connecting with your friends, and creating a community that we will hopefully find at least a pathway.
Absolutely. And if we focus on our children's future, if we make that connection, and if we realize where we're heading, how seriously wrong we're heading with climate change and biodiversity loss and depletion of resources on this planet and pollution, all of these issues are coming down on us very quickly, and they're going to destroy civilization. We're going to go down with climate change unless we massively transform. And it's so urgent now. I think the United Nations IPCC report very clearly, in very stark language, mentioned that we've 8 years left till 2030 to basically reduce our carbon emissions by 50% globally. And that actually means for countries like Ireland, by the way, 70% of a reduction is required. That's really what we need to do. Now,
that's not switching off your mobile phone or turning off that's a radical shift in the way we
absolutely. But look at the huge importance in terms of what it delivers, Gavin, in terms of all the benefits that flow from this, if we all engage in terms of it will improve our lifestyles multiply, in so many different ways, economically and in livelihoods and new careers and everything. And, look, that's going to drive all our economic situation from now on. Like, 35% of the budget is devoted to environmental issues alone. So, in other words, if we want to realize that that's going to dictate everything, every decision we make from now on is going to have to be to size up to see, does it deliver to deal with climate change and obviously deal with the wider issues of the Sustainable Development Goals. This is where we're going. Circular economy, everything.
One of the things I find about the Sustainable Development Goals, I suppose, that excites me is that when you look at them, the amount of creative work that can be done, that can be generated out of them, just to take something like education, or to take something like poverty or hunger, the amount of activity, the amount of human ingenuity that could be unlocked in tackling those challenges could be really quite transformative for our species if we were to take it seriously.
Absolutely. And, it would secure that future for our children that we need, because it's going to be very sad to think that in 10 years' time, 8 years' time, when we've gone now past if we don't respond and if we don't actually make the changes that are required, how are we going to talk to our children about this? Or our younger, and I don't mean just like children. I mean, people in their 40s or 50s are going to be very exposed to the impacts. And I mean, we are stealing from all of that generation, including you and Anja and Davy. You're all in that age group.
As young Greta Thunberg said, you adults are shitting on my future. Excuse my language, but I think she's absolutely right. I mean, it's quite stark. Again, I suppose to try and swing it to the opportunities in this.
Yeah.
To try and kind of, I suppose, focus on how we might mobilize within a county like Cavan. The opportunity there.
And Cavan has got huge things to, like it's a beautiful county. It's a wonderful place to live. I know Anja,
every day in the year, you told me once.
Yeah. But what I mean is, it has so much benefits and so many renewable resources and so many things that can be developed in Cavan, and so much opportunities. What I mean is, I think if we make this change and collectively do it and get the county council very much behind it, we can go hugely with this. I mean, I'd love to think that in every village in Cavan, there's a group, strong group, very representative, and basically very much part of the whole community that are involved in this movement, because it needs to be a movement, And I think that movement could spread from Cavan to every other counties. Other counties could learn an awful lot if Cavan led the way, and they can lead the way. And it can be done in urban communities in Cavan town, small parts of the town, but then it can be done in the overall town, and then it can move out into all those other towns in the county and villages, and get farmers. Are so important to have farmers involved in this, because they're the ones that can deliver an awful lot of the benefits to this. So I think this is really important what you're doing, put it that way. My answer has been very long. You asked me a very simple question and I should have just said, yes, this is really important. It must be done. So
Not at all. I mean, I suppose it was an interesting insight, I said, because I'm keeping an eye now, and a whole load of Fianna Fáilers went up to Cavan there last week to give out about Micheál Martin and his leadership of the Fianna Fáil party. They had a think in, I think, in a hotel in Cavan. And but it was interesting to hear some of the backbencher TDs talking about, what were they talking about? And of course, the media were all interested in his future. But the next item they all mentioned was climate change. The backbenchers in Fianna Fáil, the second item on the agenda was climate change. So maybe we are starting to see this issue becoming more mainstream. Maybe we are starting to see politicians push it up the agenda. What do you think?
Well, my feeling is that politicians, they're very good at greenwashing and very good at basically, and I'm talking generally across politics now, I'm not trying to look to any particular party, but I think they follow votes, basically. They want to be in power. That's the number one. They individually want to be elected. That's number one. The party comes second and the country comes third. But the common good isn't really, if there's no votes in it, they don't care. So I don't really think politicians are delivering. And I think too, the civil service needs a big shake-up too, because they're still stuck in the past when the challenges are now facing us are very urgent. And we have to be given the information. We have to be allowed to participate in the solutions everywhere. So I think there's a revolution on the cusp of happening that's going to really make it that citizens will be the ones that will lead it. At the moment, we're leaving it to the young kids to go out and protest. That's really unfair that we're leaving to this young kids to have to defend their future when we, my age group, have caused the damage and are causing the damage. We have to realize that we've got to get up there and say, well, if our children are willing to go out and protest about these things and are concerned about the future and seem to be much more informed about these things, then we as adults have to act on their interest, So I'm really concerned about it.
To finish up then, Duncan, I mean, what would you say to, enthuse somebody to do a climate action course in Cavan starting on the 2nd of October? Please fill in the registration. And
in other words, what would be, what would be?
What would you say to people maybe who are listening to this, who are watching this? Why would you recommend doing a course like this?
Well, I think they'll come home from the course and say that was one of the best things I did. And they will feel more empowered and they'll feel more they're part of a group that have common concerns and that really want to act on this. Because the sort of people that will come and join you are going to be really good people. There's no doubt the people that will come to this course are the ones that are really concerned. So it's a good opportunity for them to collaborate with each other and get to know each other. And they're looking for information. Those people are going to want that information and they'll want to put it into actions. So I kind of feel it's a win-win for anyone that does come to the course.
That's great, a win-win. We'll leave it at that. Duncan Stewart, thank you so much for talking with us tonight. So I'm going to hand over to Davy. Davy's going to give us an introduction to the course itself. So breaking down into the modules to give people some ideas to, what people are going to get if you sign up to the course. So Davy, over to you.
Okay, Cavan, just if you can spotlight me and I'll just share my slides.
If you want.
Okay, you can see my slides okay? Okay, well, thanks for that, Gavin and Duncan. Again, thanks for joining us. I think it's very clear that the future is very uncertain and we are running out of time to take action. It's very clear from what we just heard in the conversation between Duncan and Gavin that a lot of the funding is going to be focused on the changes we have to make, and a lot of the resources will be around how we regenerate our communities and how we do agriculture in a different way, how we bring in this circular economy. So we've developed this course out of decades of experience really in sustainable communities. Myself and Gavin didn't really introduce ourselves there at the start, but we have been since the mid-90s been involved in protecting the environment first, and then developing the Sustainable Communities Project in Cloughjordan, and then many other projects. And I was just remembering that with Duncan and Anja, we did a fantastic program with the local papers across Ireland, Get Involved, encouraging people to come up with an idea and enter it into this competition that be promoted and amplified through the local paper. And it's very similar to what we're doing here, because there is resources coming down the line, especially LEADER, in the LEADER program, transition program we have, and the new LEADER program, that really this area of environment, the local economy, the circular economy, sustainability, and matching the Sustainable Development Goals is where the resources are going to go. We need to be better at applying for these resources and being aware of what the potential projects might be. So our course is developed in a number of modules that will really give some insights and some thinking into that. What's also important as well is that there's now I can't turn my slide, sorry, that we do this together, as Duncan was highlighting, that there will be individual actions, but really what we need to match the scale of the challenges is community action and building our awareness of this. So the course starts on the 2nd of October. There's links in the chat there, and we can share these documents and this presentation, or the one pager that shows you the adventure. But the adventure begins on the 2nd of October, face-to-face in the Kilmore Pastoral Centre, where we really set the context, preside and really provide the frameworks and settings for the rest of the course. We'll be looking and exploring at the different community-led, local, cooperative projects that reconnect us with our environment, strengthen our local economy, provide meaningful livelihoods that could be potentially supported with LEADER funding. So we'll do a lot of getting to know each other, getting to know the course, doing a bit of a needs assessment, and introducing the different sessions that we'll be holding. Gavin holds the second session, which is an evening session in the Pastoral Centre again in Kilmore. It's on the 6th of October. And Gavin really goes into the climate action in a bit more depth, and the need for mitigation and adaptation and action at the community level. So we know this is the defining decade of our species. We know that we have to make big reductions in our carbon, but when we say climate action, what do we mean? This is a lot more than changing our light bulbs or even switching to electric cars. We need to do things that are smart and resilient, regenerative, and there's huge opportunities in this. So our next session I lead on the 13th of October is around community resilience. How do our communities not just cope with the challenges we face, but actually thrive in those in that new environment with a real strong local economy? So I explore the idea of the tradition of cooperatives now in the 21st century, how we might build resilience around new ideas in food co-ops or energy co-ops, or these sort of community-led projects that really strengthen the sort of social relationships and connections in a place that can help us better protect the environment and take meaningful action in our communities. We have a session on water, and we connect with the local authority water program, the LawPro program, and we really look at not only keeping our water clean and different ways of doing that, but also protecting, respecting, and loving our blue spaces, which Cavan has a lot of. So that's led by a colleague here in the Eco Village, Eileen Flanagan, who teaches a lot of our ecological design courses in water and the protection of blue space. The highlight is the middle of the course is the trip to Cloughjordan Eco Village, which because of the lockdown we've just held for the first Cavan C4CA course. So this is an opportunity to spend the day in the eco-village, look around, taste the wonderful food that comes from here, hear some of the projects and enterprises that have been supported by Leader here in Tipperary, and just get a sense of what is quite a mainstream project. It's Cloghjordan, not just the eco-village. So it's a very progressive little town with a lot going on, and a great example of what happens when we start to do more together. On the 27th of October, we come back to the evening sessions on waste and the circular economy. So this is looking far beyond recycling. It's really introducing the opportunities in the circular economy, and a circular economy which really looks at community wealth building, or the new ideas and how we sustain and make our communities thrive. So it's all connected, but we really think of ideas around zero waste and the need for moving away or going upstream from single-use plastics and these sort of things. So it's not going to be talking about recycling, but it is going to be talking about how we move to a zero waste circular economy. So sorry, my slides are moving again. On the 3rd of November, Managing Energy and Transport is a session led by Cavan again. Cavan does a lot of work with the Sustainable Energy Communities Programme with SEAI. You'll be connecting with that local Cavan project and really getting aware of energy, a bit of energy literacy. I think when we have a bit more energy literacy, we start to really examine the use or wasteful use of energy. Also, as well, the potential for moving away from fossil fuels and energy efficiency and renewables. So there's a lot in that course, in that module of the course. The last module is on the 10th of November. It's led by Dr. Oliver Moore. He teaches in the Centre for Corporate Studies in UCC. He's also an eco-villager and one of the directors of our Cloghjordan Community Farm. He also works with ARC, which is a European agency. He's the communications officer that sort of follow the organic agriculture and the CAP reform and do a lot of advocacy for organics. So he's leading a session on local food and sustainable land use. So the big opportunities, I think, in the transition we're going to make and being rural areas is around the food and the production of or the growing of food and supporting our local farmers, but also adding value and distributing food in a different way where we shorten supply chains and we really look at how we can reduce our ecological impact through healthier, vibrant local food economies, food webs, if you like, because long supply chains, it's not just about shortening them, that could still be fragile, but creating food webs between farms and enterprises and communities where we can all be food producers and food consumers and add to the local economy. So that's just an overview of the Cavan for Communities for Climate Action. There's a Facebook and we'll be sharing the links coming up. I'll just stop my slide there. Okay, so I think that was quite a whirlwind, probably a lot in there to take in. So remember, we are going to open up for questions in a second, but you can start to ask questions into the chat. You can see John Toland there just reflecting on his recent trip to Cloghjordan, certainly the highlight of the last course for him. Thanks, John. Okay, so we are going to continue our little conversations before, and a friend of mine and a colleague for a long time, Anja Murray, is here to join us now. Now, Anja Murray is an ecologist, an environmental policy analyst, an enthusiast in nature, a public speaker, a television presenter, and a broadcaster with our brilliant nature file on Lyric FM. Anja is been a colleague and someone that we've done a lot of work with in the future. And I'm delighted to welcome you to our little launch tonight, Anja. So maybe why, just to kick us off, why in the context of climate action, Anja, is...
Can I interrupt you before you even ask your first question? I just want to say that the course content looks absolutely amazing, and I can vouch for these guys that everything that they do, every time I'm pulled into some event or something by Davy, it's, you know, sometimes you're so struggling to manage the workload and do all these things, and but yeah, you know, and you just guaranteed to be energized, informed, empowered, enthused. Davy has this real community empowerment ethos, which he has been working on in such a kind of constructive, helpful way for 20 or 30 years, and he's inspired so many people. There is no way you will be disappointed if you sign up to the course. I really can't vouch for this enough, and the different people running the days that we've just heard about there are absolutely amazing. I know several of them, and just a mine of information, and very much about what you as a community can do. So sorry. Now go ahead with your first question there, Davy.
Anja, it's fantastic because we work with you nationally, but you do have a home and base in Cavan. So that's quite an interesting thing. We might reflect on the opportunities for Cavan. But just maybe again, just in this climate emergency, ecological emergency that we are now in, and we're going to just hear more of it over the months, and then leading to Glasgow and our new commitments in the Climate Action Bill. Why, in that context, is it important then to, one of the approaches you take is to connect with nature and to really value our environments around us? Why is that important?
I mean, I could take several approaches to answer this question. One of them is that, like, I've worked in climate action and biodiversity conservation and policy for quite a long time. And I think when you're really engaged in an issue such as this, it's really hard. I mean, that we've heard some of the outlines there from Duncan and from Gavin of how dire the situation we are facing is. It is really not good. And if you know, unless you're living with your head in the sand, you're going to feel anxious and depressed about this situation that we've brought ourselves to. And the fact that we have such a short time frame, you know, 8 to 10 years to really turn this thing around, that the onus is on us to act radically, urgently, to change our society and the way we do everything. And the best antidote to anxiety, for me personally, but now this is being backed up, I've done some research recently, is time in nature. There's a psychiatrist called Dr. Ian McGilchrist, and they've found that lots of different scientists and psychologists are finding that having fun and feeling good is a big part of taking positive action. That's in a general terms, that positive experiences are critically important for inspiring and motivating ourselves and motivating others. We all know people who go around kind of freaked out and ranting facts and figures and statistics at us, you know, and I've been there myself. You know, it really doesn't enable us to change. It doesn't inspire others to take positive action. And then there's a lot of, very recently in the last 5 or 10 years, there's a huge amount of psychological research, neuroscience coming out about how important connecting with nature is for our mental health. Putting it simply, nature makes us feel good. And if you don't want to believe the tons of science, and I don't have time here to kind of outline it all, think about the last time you were in nature, the last time you went for a walk in a deciduous woodland, or went for a swim in a lovely Cavan lake, or like I did last week, out wandering the boreens of West Cavan, gathering up blackberries and spotting butterflies, and, you know, exploring the everything. So many small things, little plants, like even the horsetail. I discovered that the way that comes apart is amazing. There's so much you can get lost in nature, whether that's walking down a wee road and a country hedgerow, or being in somewhere beautiful like a really wild bog. So think about that, and think about how you were different after an immersion in nature. There's this central vagal nerve, there's all this neuroscience around it, that the soft fascination, the patterns, the changing light, the distraction in a way. helps us to come out of ourselves when we're in that anxious state and we're worried in our mind about so many things. And being in nature helps to bring us out from that and connect with the world. And that in turn helps us to connect with people around us. Experiencing nature is just a joy and a wonder. It's an ecological bond that, you know, it really is getting very, very thin. And that's something that concerns me enormously, is how disconnected we are with from nature.
And if we don't connect to nature, if we don't love nature, we're not going to want to protect it. So there's and also that separation. Exactly. I think that nature bath, everyone has that empirical sort of knowledge. We know that it's healthy for us. We feel bad, we go for the walk, and it's just good for us. But that connection, I think, is one of the first disconnects, isn't it? We disconnect from nature, we disconnect from ourselves, we disconnect from each other. Yeah. So there is that reconnection, so rich, isn't it? Yeah.
And if we don't know the names of the trees, if we're not familiar with the local habitat, if we don't love it, we're not going to look at, we don't really care at all when it goes. It's absolutely essential for our empathy, our compassion. Love is the key, and being in nature and finding that connection for yourself, for your community, and that's really what leads to transformative action. So to go and connect to nature. Yeah.
Just something that's really interesting, Anja, then the sort of new circular economies, or the design of our new economies will be based on more how nature does it, you know, or we're really learning, like in permaculture design, ecological design that we teach, or biomimicry that we're seeing a new field in biology. It's all about observing nature and looking at how we might do things in a way that's more fitting rather than extractive, and, you know, the way that we have the linear take, make, waste model. We start to see the complexity of nature and learn from that, not just benefit from its wonderfulness.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to learn from the natural world, and whether it's your own psychological health or that of your community or that of the whole entire planet. And then we kind of flip on from that, and we know that taking positive action in a community level, so getting involved in something like this course, and hopefully projects that will arise from that. So coming together with your community to do something like a rivers trust, or a river restoration project in your village, or a peatland restoration program like they did in the Abbey Leaks community, or I can spend 20 minutes reaming off examples of ground up community actions. And all of those things are proven to actually manage distressing feelings of climate anxiety. Being part of a team or a group doing proactive things together, that's one of the best ways to cope with climate anxiety. And it also is absolutely what we need. We can't rely, we were talking about politicians there, on top-down action. We absolutely need the global effort, we absolutely need the political action, we need the laws, we need all of that. But we equally need communities to come together to show the way, to be innovative and creative and find their own solutions that are enjoyable. You know.
And what would you say, Anja, then would be some of the opportunities, maybe with the sort of changes that we need to make for climate action? What might be some of the opportunities for a place like Cavan?
There are so many. So as I said, I do live up in West Cavan. I'm down in Dublin quite a lot, but I'm up near Dowra, Black Lion, up that way, if anybody knows it. It's absolutely gorgeous natural environment. So that's the north of Cavan, and there's incredible meadows and pasture. Like the quantity of orchids there in spring and summer is absolutely ridiculous. A lot of those habitats are really threatened by abandonment of agriculture, as well as by forestry, by Sitka spruce plantations. There's huge opportunities to look at a different model of forestry, things like continuous cover forestry, and that's where you have mixed species of predominantly deciduous woodlands. They're more resilient to the fires and the droughts and the pests and the diseases that we will see more of with climate change. So looking at continuous cover forestry, even at a community level for small projects to get going. Community river trusts. Cavan, of course, has our 365 lakes, and we've got some wonderful rivers. There are amazing fisheries in Cavan, historically famous for fisheries. There's a lot that can be done on the community level to monitor, so you can sign up to courses for monitoring the invertebrate life in rivers and knowing more about water quality. Community river trusts are really an emerging field of action. Peat bogs as well. I don't know how many people here know much about peat bogs, but peat soils are our largest carbon store. There's 1.5 billion tons of carbon stored in Irish peat bogs, and yet most of them are drained away, and drained peatlands actually account for 11 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions equivalent per annum. That's the same as our total energy emissions in Ireland in 2018, anyway, the last figure. So a healthy peat bog is really important to store carbon and to sequester, to actively suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And our peat bogs are really tied in with flooding and with water quality. A healthy peat bog helps to filter and purify water. It makes it cheaper to treat. It improves the ecosystems of the rivers and lakes around. And of course, there's biodiversity. There's amazing plant life and animal life, things that are really specially adapted to live in the wet, acidic environment of a peat bog. And Abbey Leaks are one community where they got together, and they, a very, a regular community, and they accidentally parked, I think it was a JCB or a crane at the entry when Bord na Móna were coming in to harvest the bog. This was about 12 years ago. And they've ended up coming together with the different state agencies to restore that bog, to block up the drains. Talking about threats as well, if I'm thinking more of the south of the county, the south of Cavan, dairy industry is growing, is becoming more and more intensive. The number of cows are growing, the grasslands are being transformed and reseeded, and across Ireland, dairy industry is quite a threat in terms of growing emissions from climate change, loss of biodiversity, and threats to water quality. And there are local area-based schemes. I know that there's one fledgling up near me in West Cavan, and that's where they're kind of community-led. The prescriptions in those schemes are community-driven, and they're tailored specifically to that landscape. So results-based schemes, locally led area schemes are really the way forward for agriculture. So there's a huge amount, whether it's the rivers and the lakes, or the bogs, the woodlands, the forests, the farmlands. I know that Cavan people are very proud of their natural environment, and funnily enough, it doesn't, people don't think of Cavan in the same way, the landscapes that we think of in Kerry, and I'm certainly an advocate for the fabulous natural beauty of Cavan. I live there and I bring people up all the time. But there is a lot to be done. Locally based projects, there's so many opportunities in Cavan, and all of these, we're talking about climate change, we're talking about biodiversity. The two are so interlinked. You can't separate out climate action from biodiversity action.
And I suppose that what you've mentioned there, the restoring ecosystems, carbon drawdown, there has to be jobs and livelihoods there as well. And with a beautiful environment, and especially in this culture now of staycations and really appreciating the environments of our country, then fantastic that there could be opportunities emerging for community-led local tourism, slow tourism.
Yeah, we know how many jobs, livelihoods more than jobs, but there would have been out of the fisheries resource in Cavan, and we know that that's largely gone now because the water quality is gone. That can be brought back. We can restore rivers and lakes. We can restore the fisheries. Similarly, for the woodlands with continuous cover forestry, they talk about having a continuous canopy, but also a continuous income. And it's a very different approach to forestry rather than having one clear fell cycle every 40 years, and where there is continuous. But there's skills needed, there's a lot needed to transform to this way of approaching forest management. With all of the examples I've set out, there are opportunities for livelihoods. Yeah.
And I think that's what this course is trying to tease out, not just the threats, but the opportunities. Anja, we've come to the end of our time. Thanks so much for giving us some of your time and having that conversation there. So we're going to move on now. We're going to invite in a former participant of the Communities for Climate Action. Just trying to bring Gavin in here. I can't seem to get you in here, Gavin. Yeah, I need to Okay. Gavin, can you put your video on?
Yeah, I'm back now.
Hi, Gavin. Hi, David.
Hi,
Anna.
Hi, Anna.
Hi. So Gavin, and for everyone who's here, Gavin and David invited me just to come on and say a few words about my experience of doing the course in Cavan last year. So I just kind of jotted down some notes. So firstly, I hope everybody who's here today who hasn't done before will do it, because I find it like really engaging and really informative. I'm someone who has always been, I thought, active and engaged in like climate action and stuff, but then I did the course and realized that I have so much to learn and so much more, you know, there's so much more that can be done. And just because you think you know something doesn't mean you do. So that was kind of, it was eye-opening for me, and just like how much more needs to be done there. But also I found the entire course like very hopeful. So like what Duncan and Anja was saying today, yes, we are in the middle of a climate crisis, but the course will tell you that if we all work together, we can actually do something to put us all back on the right track. So I find that like really encouraging as well, because I know a lot of people out there may be suffering from what they call eco-anxiety. And so I just thought then I'd just walk through like what we did and how I find kind of each stage of the course. So the first one, day one, we met up at the Pastoral Centre in Cavan Town, and that was really, really interesting because we did lots of exercises together as a group, and kind of like, how sustainable are you? And again, it was very eye-opening for all of us, and realizing, you know, how much our actions do matter, and how much, you know, for example, what your carbon footprint is, what you for our carbon footprint you think it is, but when you actually sit down and work it out, how much greater it probably is. Then when you add that all together, it was also a group of, I think we were 21 people, how great that actually is. So, you know, it was a good example of, you know, individual action versus community action are two completely different things. And then for the rest of the course, we were all on Zoom, and I actually think the next course is going to be so lucky to be able to meet in person, because you'll be able to form those much stronger bonds with each other, and like, you know, have that chit chat over your tea and coffee break, which we unfortunately won't be able to do. But yeah, I'm really excited for you guys about that. But the first day, like, we did our climate action and just talking about climate action in general, and it was like so good for just getting all those facts and stuff. You know, when you talk to people who are who maybe, you know, don't believe in climate change or anything like that, you know, or like aren't with the facts that we need to be like, no, this is a thing and we need to act on it. So that was like really great. And day three, like when we did like our community resilience, again, it just kind of really kind of honed in, like, you know, how getting community together just really, yeah, it was just really, I actually found that day just like really, really hopeful. And the next two, like water and waste and like circular economy, were really interesting, just because, like, again, how individual actions can you know, affect so much, but how important water is to us, especially here in Ireland. You know, we take water so much for granted, and then we learned in the course that actually only 1% of water in the world is potable. You know, you're just like, oh, I gotta stop running that tap when I'm brushing my teeth. But also, you know, the wastewater and, you know, all of that. And then like the waste in the circular economy, and just how much is wasted. Like, you know, even, you know, I think Cavan's really lucky now, since the course has happened, we now have the Eco Shack in Cavan Town. You know, I think Cavan is ready for this course as well, because, you know, we have the Eco, got the green box. I mean, we are taking the right steps to have that circular economy, and I would just love to see from like people doing this course to take that even further. And then energy and transport was one that I like was really, really interested in, because I cycle absolutely everywhere. I hate having to take the car. So it was just they did a really good like video on like how much energy we use on a day-to-day basis in our homes, where I think it was done by Channel 4.
The bicycle one.
Bicycle, yeah, exactly. That was so interesting, because they're in the video, the guy in the house trying to have a shower, and next in the shed next door, there's like 40 cyclists huffing, trying to generate enough energy. I mean, they might as well have been doing the Tour de France. It was kind of crazy. But it just shows how much energy we consume without actually realizing it. Yeah, and then just the emphasis on transport and how transport in this country needs to be improved so much more from a public transport point of view, the over-reliance that we have on cars. Even I said, like, I cycle everywhere, but just, you know, so much more needs to be done to support that.
And Hannah, just to ask you a question then, the group, I suppose the community, I know you were burdened with the whole Zoom thing, but
Yeah.
recently you had an opportunity to, I mean, we had to cancel Cloughjordan, which was, you know, scheduled for you guys. We couldn't do it because of lockdown, but we went there 2 weeks ago, and we had about 16 people from the class turned up in Cloughjordan, and you had a chance to meet with them again, and I suppose have that more human interaction around the course. What do you think the potential for that now? In, you know, did you enjoy Cloughjordan first of all? Was it an interesting experience for you?
Cloughjordan was really, really great, and it was kind of, you know, it really did just show when a group of people get together how much you can achieve. And you know, you've gone, you have an entire village there. You know, there was just a couple of people who were interested in doing that. What was it, 10, 15 years ago? We're like, oh, let's set up an eco village where we all live by sustainable practices, and it's actually there thriving. And it's such a great example of, if you put your mind to something, you can achieve it, and you as a group can achieve like amazing things. And you know, and I think a lot, you know, I think everybody who went to it on that day was really inspired.
But do you think we'll get an eco village in Cavan then?
Yeah,
I mean, you've probably got loads of really good eco villages there already, but
yeah,
maybe we could just kind of, maybe people could start kind of maybe, yeah. What do you think?
definitely. I mean, there's a housing crisis in Cavan as well. So, you know, anything that, I think people will sign up for anything if it will mean they'll get a house at the end of the day. So definitely, I definitely think, as I said, like, you know, so much, even since we've done the course, so much has changed in Cavan with regards to like the green box and the eco shack, and even the new climate action, even the new climate act, where you know, the local council now has to include what they're going to do. They have to create their own 5-year climate action plan, and has to be linked into the local development plan. I mean, we didn't have that 12 months ago, which is really exciting to think that even government is now moving on with this. And I think then by having a course like this, again, it gives citizens of Cavan more information, more power. So when our TDs are not doing what they're supposed to do, we can be like, well, actually, the sustainable development go and say this is not in your climate action plan. Please act on this. You know, I just think that's, you know, there's not, yeah, I think Cavan it's ready for stuff like this.
Right.
Yeah. And even I was just going to speak then as well, just to what I've come out of the course, like having finished it. Well, I don't have a big project like some of the other ladies, some of the other people in the group. Some people had like bulk projects and stuff started up. One lady was setting up kind of her own health center, sustainable development practice. But I find that for me talking about this and talking about it more confidently with more information, people around me are making small changes. Like my mother-in-law is now buying everything from her local refill shop. Our office now recycle things. I know that's not the answer, but I mean, we were throwing glass bottles in the black bin. We now have glass recycling. It's very exciting. We have a green team in the office as well, which I helped to set up. And I even myself now, I'm signing up to do a course in environmental law in October. So thanks, guys. I probably wouldn't have signed up if we hadn't done this course last year.
Well, it was a pleasure, Hannah. Can I say it was great working with you guys, and it was great. We had, you know, such a range of people in the class. We had everyone from Aaron, who I think was 16 years old in school and really feeling it from that youth position right through to, you know, people of a much older generation and everyone in between. So it was a great group, and it was lovely to work with you. So thanks again very much for your.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back again today.
You're welcome, and thank you for coming.
No worries. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Hannah. So we're going to take a little bit of a pause and just see if there's any questions you have on the course or some of the themes around the course, or any uncertainty or anything that's not clear. Is there anyone that's got a question, you can put your hand up. You could just unmute. I think Liam Murta had a question, not necessarily on the course, but just the role of local authorities and the role in climate action and the drive to reduce the emissions in the geographic area. So I think we're going to see more focus for local authorities to get involved in this. Every local authority probably is signing up a climate awareness officer, climate action officer. Gavin, do you know much about that? I think it'd be great to get more local authority people into this course and have a mix of participants.
It really would. It would be great to have them in. I also think that, you know, by affiliation, we've got the Leader Company and Cavan County Local Development. We've got, you know, I think a growing awareness now, things like the Sustainable Energy Community Programme. They offer a great vehicle for local authorities to work in partnership with their communities. And that's happening more and more now. Where I am in Dublin, and I'm working with the Sustainable Energy Community Programme here in the Dublin and Mid-East region. We have a partnership with all 7 local authorities where they are actively participating now, partnering with communities to establish viable sustainable energy communities. And I think, you know, local authorities really can take a lead in this. And I think, you know, this is an exciting time for them also. So please do join us 2nd of October. Link is in the chat box there.
So is there any questions, uncertainty or clarity needed on the course?
Thanks, Gavin.
Or anything you've heard, if you have. Also, what would be really interesting for us is how do we reach people that we might not be thinking of? How do we get not just the usual suspects into these courses? Now, one of the things that Duncan and Gavin were talking about was the Tidy Towns groups. Now they have to link to the Sustainable Development Goals and applications, and I found that great opportunity with Tidy Town leaders to show you're actually doing all that. You just have to relate it to these different goals. So there's an opportunity, I think, for more awareness around the sustainability agenda, the climate agenda, and sometimes with communities you can get to. So if anyone has any suggestions at all, we'd be delighted to hear them.
Maybe visit our Facebook page and you know, share our many posts there within your networks. We'd love you to spread the word. There's another 2 weeks of recruitment, and as I say, we've got 2 more courses to run in Cavan. So there's plenty of space in this for people, you know. So we're here to try and guide you. We're trying to make it as easy as possible. Our next course is going to be a safe environment, a safe person-to-person training experience. But I think there may well be an appetite for an online blended experience also. So we're open to that if face-to-face isn't your thing and you feel as though you'd rather do some learning in a more online blended way. Well, you know, that is something we can also offer with our course, our 3rd and final course. So, you know, I think there's something there for everybody. So please, any help that you have or can offer in sharing the word and letting people know about this, we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, there's just Carmel there in the chat coming in and saying that she would it be possible to attend some of the modules virtually. Also, the time 6:30 she's suggesting is too early. We have found that, Carmel, but what we do is we do a bit of networking for the first half hour, 40 minutes, and then we go into the module. So we can accommodate that as well. And thanks for highlighting that. That is, it does seem like a barrier with work commitments and travel. So yes, we will try and blend. So we just, that should be easy enough to do that.
That option is actually, if you go to the registration page, there's an option in the questions on the registration page, which type of course you would prefer, a blended option or a face-to-face option. So, you know, Carmel, if your choice is something like that, do sign up to the course and we can call you in to course 3, which is probably going to be delivered in a blended form.
Okay, thanks for that, Carmel. Any questions? Duncan, you've got a question.
It's just kind of following on what both of you were just saying, you know, about the blended option. Can you have a situation where you have, say, an in-person event on, but that you can invite in an online sort of audience also, so you can actually reach out to maybe others that can't make it to the meeting? In other words, where you have your actual in-person group, you have the dialogue going on there between all of those, and those outside that are just online, maybe they can send in their questions, text in their questions or their issues. But what I mean is, could you do that type of version? Is that possible?
Yes, I think we can really look at that as blended is the term, and I think is really important now, especially some people might be feeling more vulnerable or might be more difficult, less mobile, say. So I think it's good for inclusion that we consider that blended approach, face-to-face and online participation.
And especially for people, I think, David, that might be a distance away, Cavan is a large county and, they mightn't be able to travel to get there or whatever. And then the carbon emissions associated with driving anyway. What I mean is it would be, I think that's great that you can offer that type of flexibility. It's good.
We're trying to offer both. I think we've delivered this course now in Kildare, we've delivered it in Wexford, and we're delivering it in Cavan, and we've delivered it in all shapes and sizes. So totally online in Wexford, completely face-to-face in Kildare. And I suppose just looking at the outcomes from all of those, there's definitely benefits in the face-to-face, where that social glue, that connection between people, where as Hannah described, the chat over a cup of tea, that cementing of a group is a real benefit. But then, of course, in a COVID environment, we have to consider other options. And the last year and a half has taught us something really important, that it is possible to learn, to share, to experience through this online format as well. So I think, we're nimble enough in being able to deliver that. So we really do want to be able to provide a course for anyone to get involved.
Well, there's no more questions and I don't want to keep you. So maybe, Gavin, you could just do the very next steps and maybe just thank our supporters.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, none of this would be happening without Cavan County Local Development. So thanks to everyone there. And we're delighted to be part of this. Those of you who are here tonight who are considering doing the course, please do take a copy of those links that we've put into the chat, or click on them now so that you can fill it in at your leisure. We can also